All right, here we go. Zechariah, we're going to be doing Zechariah 8 to 14 first. Let's see here. All right, get onto YouTube here. Okay, we're on YouTube here. All right, let me just exit out of that. Whoops. Go back to Zoom here. Okay, we're on live. Let me do recording to the cloud. All right, shalom, everyone. I'm Brother Doug with the Awakened by Yahuwah Fellowship Assembly in Yahuwah Almighty and Yahushua Messiah. Today, we are going to be continuing our Haftarah readings as we're closing out the year here for these Haftarah readings. We're going to be doing today Zechariah 8 to 14, Ecclesiastes 6 to 9, and Revelations 18 to 22. I'm going to be starting us off with Zechariah 8. I will be reading from my Lexham English Septuagint, which is based on Henry Sweet's Septuagint. So this is my physical copy here. All right, so starting off Zechariah chapter 8. Okay, a message of restoration and rejoicing. And the word of Yahuwah Almighty came, saying, this is what Yahuwah Almighty says, I was jealous of Jerusalem and Zion with a great jealousy. I have envied her with wrath. This is what Yahuwah says, I will return upon Zion and dwell in the middle of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem will be called the genuine city. The mountain of Yahuwah Almighty will be called a set-apart mountain. This is what Yahuwah Almighty says. Male elders and female elders will yet sit in the wide streets of Jerusalem, each having his staff in his hand, having lived for many days, and the wide streets of the city will be full of young boys and young girls playing in its wide streets. This is what Yahuwah Almighty says, whether it seems impossible before the remnant of this people in those days, should it seem impossible even to me, says Yahuwah Almighty. This is what Yahuwah Almighty says, behold, I am saving my people from the land of the east, from the land of the west. I will lead them and settle them in the middle of Jerusalem, and they will be to me a people, and I will be to them a Elohim, in truth and in righteousness. This is what Yahuwah Almighty says, let your hands be strengthened, you who obeyed in these days, in these words from the mouth of the prophets, from the day that the house of Yahuwah Almighty was established, from the day in which the temple was built. Because before those days, the wages of the people did not exist for profit. The wages of the livestock were not present, for one going out, for one going in peace from oppression did not exist. So I sent away all the people, each against his neighbor, and now I will not do to the remnant of this people according to the previous days, says Yahuwah Almighty. Rather, I will show peace. The vine will give its fruit. Now that's an interesting verse there, because who in the New Testament is the vine? Yahusha's the vine.
Yes.
But Yahuwah is talking here and calling himself the vine. Interesting.
Yeah, the oneness there.
Yeah. And the land will give its produce, and the sky will give its dew, and I will give an inheritance to the remnant of this, my people. Notice how he keeps referring to his people as a quote-unquote remnant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so keep that in mind when we see scriptures like all of Yasharel shall be saved. Yeah, keep in context with it's a remnant that shall be saved. Okay. O house of Yehuda and house of Yasharel, thus I will deliver you, and you will be as a baraka. Behold, be bold and be strong in your hands, because this is what Yahuwah Almighty says, the way I have intended to mistreat you when your ancestors provoked me to anger, says Yahuwah Almighty, I did not reconsider. Thus, I have sent an order and intend in these days to do Tob to Jerusalem and the house of Yehuda. Be courageous. These are the words that you should do. Speak truth each to his neighbor. Right rule truth and make peaceful right rulings in your gates. Let each not consider the evil of his neighbor in your hearts. Do not love a false oath, since I have hated all these things, says Yahuwah Almighty. The word of Yahuwah Almighty came to me. Yahuwah Almighty says the fourth fast, the fifth fast, the seventh fast, The 10th fast will be for the house of Yehuda for joy and merriment, and for a Tov feast, so will rejoice and love truth and peace. And I know some of your translations are going to say month. Month's not in the text, just to let you know. Month is added by the translator when it says 4th month, 5th month, etc. It's not in the Hebrew or the Greek, just to let you know.
What verse are you on?
That is Zechariah 8:18, or actually 8:19. So these fasts, by the way, it's interesting to note if you have like a paraphrase Bible like the NLT, it seems to allude to these fasts being traditional fasts, not commanded, but traditional fasts that they were keeping as fast to Yahuwah. And basically the context, it would seem to allude that the context is that these fasts are no more going to be mournful festivals, that they will be festivals of feasting. So that's the purpose of this. Yahuwah is not giving a new commandment out of nowhere where you have to keep festivals and different times that they weren't keeping from Leviticus 23. So like this is why I personally, in my opinion, like how the NLT translates this verse. It says, this is what Yahuwah of armies says: the traditional fasts, times of mourning you have kept in early summer, midsummer, autumn, and winter are now ended. They will become festivals of joy and celebration for the people of Yehuda, so love truth and peace. And the reason I agree with them about that they were traditional fast times is because nowhere in the Torah does it ever say that you're supposed to fast on certain months. If that makes any sense. Nowhere does it say you need to fast on the 4th, 5th, etc. There's no commandment in Leviticus 23 that says that you need to make, and actually the New Testament would give another witness to that Yahushua and his disciples did not fast on traditional fasts, and that's why the Pharisees were mad at them. So I would recommend you go into the New Testament to get a witness of that too, where the Judeans had traditional fasts that they implemented that by themselves are not contradicting Torah. They're not wrong to have, you want to have traditional times that you want to fast, but at the same time, they're not binding, they're not law. Okay. So, and that's what this verse seems to talk about in context, that Yahuwah says, these fast times that you have for yourselves, that you fast to me on, will no more be days of mourning, but feasts. Basically, he's turning their mourning into joy, is the context there. Okay. Verse 20. This is what Yahuwah Almighty says, yet many people will come, even ones who dwell in many cities, and those who dwell in 5 cities shall come together into one city, saying, let us go to pray before the face of Yahuwah, and to seek out the face of Yahuwah Almighty. And I myself will go, and many people, many nations will come to seek out the face of Yahuwah Almighty in Jerusalem, and to propitiate the face of Yahuwah. Now, it's very worded really weird here, because sometimes there's words lacking when you translate one language to another. It in the English, it would make more sense to say propitiate or atone before the face of Yahuwah. The word before would make a little bit more sense in that phrase, but for some reason the word before is not there. So it's kind of like a weird worded sentence. But anyway, this is what Yahuwah Almighty says: in those days, if 10 men from every tongue of the nation should seize, then let them seize the fringe of the garment of a Judean man, saying, we will go with you, because we have heard that Elohim is with you. What's interesting here, it's using the same, by the way, the same Greek word here in verse 23 of the Septuagint is used when the woman that had the issue of blood grabbed Yahusha's hem. Okay, it wasn't a hem, it was a fringe, a tassel. Okay, it was his tzitzit. Okay, so it's showing that even in the future, you're still going to have people wearing tzitzits. By the way, that's not done away with. Okay, so I find it interesting that a real Judean is going to be in the land, and the Gentiles are grabbing the fringe of a real Judean, saying, we will go with you, because we have heard that Elohim is with you, or Yahuwah is with you. So that was the end of chapter 8 there. A lot of interesting stuff. A lot of future prophecy still to be fulfilled, especially the last verse there. Okay, so the oracle of the word of Yahuwah. In the land of Hadrach and Damascus is his sacrifice. Because Yahuwah will oversee the people and every tribe of Yashrael, and in Hamath among its borders, Tyre and Sidon. Because they have very much understanding, and Tyre built a stronghold for itself, and stored up silver as dust and gold as the mud of the road. On account of this, Yahuwah will inherit them. He will strike its power into the sea, and this one will be consumed in fire. Ashkelon will see and fear, and even Gaza will feel very much pain, and Ekron, because it will be ashamed concerning its transgressions, and the Cain will perish from Gaza. Ashkelon will not be settled, and foreigners will draw in Ashdod, and I will take down the pride of foreigners. Okay. And I will lift up their blood out of their mouth, and their abominations out of the middle of their teeth. But even these will be spared for our Elohim, and they will be as a captain in Yehuda, and Ekron will be like the Jebusites. Interesting. I will set under my house an encampment so that no one may pass across, not even to turn back, and it should surely not attack against them, no longer driving them away, because now I have seen with my eyes. Rejoice very much, O daughter of Zion. Announce, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king comes to you, righteous and able to keep alive. He is humble, mounted upon a mule, even a foal of a donkey. Okay, obviously that's prophecy foreshadowing Yahusha doing that. Okay, and he will utterly destroy chariots from Ephraim, and a horse out of Jerusalem, and a warlike bow will be utterly destroyed, and even a number of them. There will be peace from the nations, and he will rule waters to seas and rivers in the passageway of the land. And you, in the blood of your covenant, sent away your prisoners from a pit that has no water. Drop down in the strongholds, O prisoners of the assembly, and in the place of one day of your exile, I will repay you double. Because I stretched you, O Yehuda, for myself like a bow, and I filled Ephraim. And I shall awaken your children, O Zion, against the children of the Greeks. And I will touch you like a sword of a fighter, and Yahuwah will be upon them, and he will come out like a lightning bolt. Yahuwah Almighty will sound with a war trumpet, and he will come with a surge of his anger. Yahuwah Almighty will protect them, and they will consume them, and they will overwhelm them with the slain stones, and they will drink them like wine. They will fill up a shallow bowl like an altar. And Yahuwah their Elohim will save them in that day. His people like sheep and like set apart stones, they will roll down upon his land. Because if anything is tov, it is from him. If anything is beautiful, it is him. Grain for young men and fragrant wine for virgins. That's the end of chapter 9 there. Page chapter 10. Yahuwah providently cares for his people. Ask rain from Yahuwah according to the early season and late in season. Yahuwah made a sign. He will give winter rain to them, to each herb in the field, because the ones who spoke troubles, and the seers have false visions, and they were speaking false dreams. They proposed pointless ideas through this. They will be dried up like sheep. They were afflicted because there was no healing. My wrath is provoked against the shepherds, and I will visit upon the lambs. And Yahuwah Elohim Almighty will examine his flock, the house of Yehuda, and he will appoint them as his beautiful horse in battle. And from him he looked out attentively, and from him he appointed. From him was a bow in wrath. From him, everyone who drives out will go out with it, and they will be like warriors and walking on the mud in the roads in battle, and they will set up army because Yahuwah is with them. And horse riders will be dishonored, and I will prevail over the house of Yehuda, and I will preserve the house of Joseph, and I will establish them, because I have loved them. And they will be as though I had not turned them back. Because I am Yahuwah their Elohim, and I will hear them. And they will be like the warriors of Ephraim, and their heart will be glad as if with wine. And their children will see and be gladdened, and their heart will be glad concerning Yahuwah. I will make known to them, and I will receive them, because I will redeem them, and they will be multiplied as they were many. And I will sow them among the people. So this is talking about the dispersion here. Okay, and the ones from afar will remember me. They will rear their children, they will return, and I will return them from the land of Egypt, and from Assyria I will receive them. And to Gilead and to Lebanon I will bring them in, and not even one of them will be left behind. And they will pass through a narrow sea, and they will strike the waves in the sea, and the depths of the rivers will dry up. And every pride of Assyria will be removed, and the scepter of Egypt will be taken away, and I will prevail over them in Yahuwah their Elohim, and in his name they will boast, says Yahuwah. So I find this interesting. I know some people like to spiritualize Assyria and Egypt. I respectfully disagree. I believe it's talking about physical Egypt and physical Syria he's taking his people from. So there seems to be some of the dispersion, or a good amount of them, seem to be in Egypt and Assyria for some reason in the end times. I also find it interesting that you could say, well, Yahuwah did bring a select minority, or some of the Assyrian captivity did come back. In the New Testament time period, you had the Samaritans, quote unquote, in the land, which seemed to be Ephraim, the house of Ephraim, under the name of the Samaritans, because they seem to be, for some reason, they seem to be hinted at as Northern House Israelites in the New Testament, and just looking at the history of Samaria and all that. Samaria was supposed to be the capital of Ephraim back even in the times of David and all that. So you could technically say, I guess, a partial fulfillment would be, some of these Northern House captivity coming back from Assyria. I guess you could say that, but I think it's mainly a end times prophecy still to be fulfilled there in Zechariah 10, in my opinion. But anyway, so moving on, Zechariah 11, the two shepherds. In my opinion, you could say the two messiahs. You'll see why after I get through this chapter. Open your doors, O Lebanon. Let fire devour your cedar trees. Let the pine tree cry out, because the cedar has fallen. Because great men have suffered greatly. Cry out, O oak trees of Bashan, because the thickly wooded thicket has been destroyed. There is a sound of mourning, shepherds, because their greatness has suffered misery. There's a sound of roaring lions, because the pride of the Jordan has suffered misery. What is this? This is what Yahuwah Almighty says. Heard the sheep of slaughter, which those who acquired them slaughtered, and they did not repent. And those selling them were saying, Baruch is Yahuwah, and we have become rich. And their shepherds did not suffer anything for them. On account of this, I will not have pity any longer on the ones who dwell in the land, says Yahuwah. And behold, I hand over the people, each into the hands of his neighbor, into the hands of his king, and they will cut down the land, and I will not rescue them out of their hand. So I will shepherd the sheep of the slaughter into the land of the Canaanites, and I will take for myself two rods. The one I call beauty, the other I call allotment, and I will shepherd the sheep. So we see kind of a foreshadowing of the splitting of the two sticks here. It's kind of like you could say the prequel to Ezekiel 37. Okay, so I will shepherd sheep, one stick called beauty, one called allotment, and I will shepherd the sheep. I will lift up 3 shepherds in 1 month, and my life will be hardened against them, for even their lives howl against me. And I said, I will not shepherd you. The thing that dies, let it die. the thing that remains, let it remain. As for the remaining, let them be the thing that remains, let it remain. As for the remaining, let them be devoured, each one the flesh of his neighbor. And I will take my rod, the beautiful one, I will put it away in order to scatter abroad my covenant, which I disposed with all the people. And it will be scattered abroad in that day. And the Canaanites will acknowledge the guarded sheep for me, because this is the word of Yahuwah. And I will say to them, if it is told before you, give me my wages or forbid it. So they established my wages as 30 pieces of silver. And Yahuwah said to me, drop them into the smelting furnace. I will search out if it's told in the manner it is tested concerning them. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them into the house of Yahuwah, into the smelting furnace. And I threw away the second rod allotment to scatter abroad the possession between Yehuda and Yasharal. And Yahuwah said to me, yet once more, take for yourself the equipment of a shepherd, of an unskilled shepherd. Because behold, I will raise up a shepherd upon the earth. He will not visit the perishing. He will not seek the scattered. He will not restore the shattered. He will not direct the intact. He will devour the meat of the chosen. He will dislocate their joints. O you who tend the pointless things, and you who leave behind the sheep, there will be swords upon his arm and upon his right eye. His arm drying up will dry up, and his right eye being blinded will be made blind. So personally, I've always liked the King James version of this verse. I'll just read you guys how it seems like the King James version of this verse is very fitting. And it seems like a lot of the elite today seem to either be poking fun at us or something, the way they cover their right eye. Okay, I believe this is a prophecy about the beast, in my opinion, and this is pointing to the end times anti-Messiah. So it says here in, let's see here, if I go to the KJV here for this verse in verse 17, real quick. Okay, so it says here, authorized version. Okay, it says, woe to the idle shepherd, IDOL, idle shepherd, that leaves the flock. The sword shall be upon his arm and upon his right eye, and his arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. If you ever see these celebrities covering their one eye on photos, this is why. They're telling you that they serve the beast. They're telling you they serve this idle shepherd. This is like the one title it seems like we were raised in the church not to understand. This is a title for the beast prophetically, that he's an idle shepherd. He's a false shepherd that doesn't care for the flock, doesn't care for the scattered. You compare him to Yahusha, he's everything Yahusha is not, pretty much. He's the antithesis of Yahusha. So I find that interesting. Go ahead, brother Joshua.
I would definitely agree. However, I also see some other things in it. Maybe I'm over spiritualizing, but I find it interesting that these people that follow this, whether they do it intentionally or whether they don't do it intentionally, when they're going against Yahuwah's word and they're following this false shepherd, Yahuwah allows their eyes to be, he allows them to be blinded. He allows them to be darkened, so to speak. You can also see that, Yahusha is the right hand, the arm of Yahuwah, and it kind of seems like Nimrod is the arm or the hand of Satan.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like the old saying Yahusha would say in the Brit Hadashah, allow the blind to lead the blind, they both fall in a ditch. It's one of his harshest sayings, but that's what he says. So, and I know other people have different philosophies on that. They think it's wrong for us to allow people to be deceived, but Yahusha says sometimes, if the blind are following the blind, let them both fall in the ditch. So I'm just saying we're not supposed to be policemen. We're not. Yahusha doesn't. He
Force
doesn't.
himself on people.
Yeah. He doesn't want us to be basically babysitters of people falling to false doctrines. Is I guess where I'm getting at. We're not supposed to be babysitters and constantly have to constantly look after sheep that want to go after a false teacher or shepherd out there. If they want to do that, that's their own choice. They want to be blinded and willfully being blinded by a blind leader. Yahusha says, let them fall in the ditch. So I think we've gotten this false concept from the Christian church that we need to be policemen over the body of Messiah. We need to constantly look after people. This idea. I get it. We are our brothers and sisters keepers, but there's a certain point where if people want to be deceived, they're going to be deceived. If that's really what they want, it's gonna.
That's true. That's true. And it's like today is such a sad day, even though we were all part of it. I mean, we can't forget that we were part of the Christmas stuff. But once you understand and know the depths of it, it's really a sad day for me because people just don't get it. They don't get the fact that this is such an evil day and it's such an abhorrent day, even though the Christmas lights and the Christmas festivities and the beauty of the supposedly season is what really enthralls people into it.
Yeah.
It's such a deep delusion that no matter what you tell people, they just don't get it.
No,
They don't get it.
Yeah.
Yes, Satan uses, those are his tools, the pretty songs, the pretty lights, I mean, you can't help but driving through places and say, oh, isn't that beautiful?
Well,
you can't help but look at that and say that, but you know what they're doing, and it no longer holds such a place.
Yeah. What's interesting too is Babylon, prophetically, Mystery Babylon, Revelations 18 says, no longer will they hear the sound of her songs. So I've seen many Israelite type of congregations talk about that, trying to witness to their own people, their own ethnicity, and trying to wake them up like, they're using you, they're pimping you out to sing their songs. It's all part of Babylon, the whole Christmas songs and all that. That's all of the whore. So the whore of Babylon has her songs, has her little seductions of music. And it's interesting, one of the books that just happened to be taken out says, Ecclesiasticus warns us, also known as the Book of Sirach, warns us that be careful of a woman that sings. Don't be taken captive by her singing, warning us men. Because sometimes witchcraft can be used that way. Music can be used as witchcraft.
Oh, absolutely.
To get men enticed to women, to be seduced by women, just any way you look at it, music, Satan uses music to seduce people into ideologies, not just sexually seduce, but like seduce as in doctrine and stuff like that. But anyway, I find that interesting. The whole singing of Christmas seems to connect to the fall of the whore of Revelations 18.
It feeds the flesh. It's a holiday that feeds the
That's
flesh.
why it's hard to give up.
That's why it's hard to give up, because we love the food, we love the songs, we love the gifts, we love to give the gifts. That's another thing that's like a big deal, is the passion of watching somebody open something that you've given to them. That's another part of the passion. And, it's all a flesh feeding thing, which you're right, Doug. That's why it's so hard to get people to give it up.
Yep, exactly. All right. So we're gonna start Zechariah 12 here. Okay, so the oracle, and I think Greek word for oracle would just be word here. So it would be the word of Yahuwah concerning Yasharal. Yahuwah says, the one stretching out the heavens and lays the foundations of the earth, forming the breath of a person in him. So breath, ruach. Okay, so it's talking about that he's the one that formed every spirit that's in us. Okay. Behold, I set Jerusalem as a doorway to be shaken by all the surrounding people. And in Yehuda, there will be a fortified enclosure against Jerusalem. And it will be in that day, I will set Jerusalem as a trampling stone by all nations. And in this context, it doesn't mean every country. Nations in the Greek is ethnos, ethnicities. So it doesn't mean that every country is going to be there. Everyone who tramples it when mocking will mock. And all the ethnoses of the land will be gathered together against it. In that day, says Yahuwah Almighty, I will strike every horse with terror, its rider with madness, but on the house of Yehuda I will open my eyes, and all the horses of the people I will strike with blindness, and the captains of Yehuda will say in their hearts, we will find for ourselves the ones who dwell in Jerusalem, in Yahuwah Elohim, their Yahuwah Almighty, their Elohim. In that day I will set the captains of Yehuda as a firebrand of fire in firewood, and as torches of fire and straw. They will devour from the right and from the left all the people from all around, and Jerusalem will settle itself down again, even in Jerusalem, and Yahuwah will save the tents of Yehuda just as from the beginning, so that the pride of the house of David and the elation of the ones who reside in Jerusalem might not be increased over Yehuda. And it will be in that day, Yahuwah will protect over the ones who reside in Jerusalem, and the weak will be among them in that day, like David. And the house of David will be like the house of Elohim, like the angel of Yahuwah before them. And it will be in that day I will desire to remove all the nations coming against Jerusalem. So this is all context of like the Gog-Magog war. This is like all about the nations coming against Jerusalem, Yahuwah rescuing them. You can read about that in Ezekiel chapter 38. I believe obviously this is a you could say a mid-trib at the end of the tribulation context of this war when it happens. You can find that also 2 chapters later. When we get to 14, you'll see a more expounding on that concept of that war. Anyway, verse 10, I will pour out upon the house of David and upon the ones who dwell in Jerusalem a spirit of favor and of mercy. They will look attentively to me. So Yahuwah is saying he's the one they pierced physically. He's saying he's the one they put on the stake. Because they dance triumphantly, and they will mourn for it with a mourning as for a beloved friend. And they will be grieved with a grief as for the firstborn in that day. The mourning in Jerusalem will be increased like the mourning for a pomegranate orchard that is cut down in a plain. And the land will mourn, tribes by tribes, the tribe of the house of David according to itself, and its women according to themselves. The tribe of the house of Nathan according to itself, and its women according to themselves. The tribe of the house of Levi according to itself, and its women according to themselves. The tribe of the Shimeites according to itself, and its women according to themselves. All the tribes who remain, a tribe according to itself, and its women according to themselves. Okay, so now we are about to be at 13 here. Yahuwah cleanses Yasharal. In that day, every place will be laid open for the house of David and those who dwell in Jerusalem for removal and for separation. And it will be in that day, says Yahuwah of armies, I will utterly destroy the names of the idols from the earth, and there will no longer be a memory of them. And I will remove the false prophets and the unclean spirit from the land. And it will be, if a person should still prophesy, even his father and his mother who brought him forth will say to him, you should not live, because you have spoken false things against the name of Yahuwah. And his fathers and his father and his mother who brought him forth will bind him while he prophesies. And it will be in that day the prophets will be ashamed, each of his vision while he prophesied, and they will be put on a cloak made of hair because they lied. And he will say, I am not a prophet, because I am a person working the land, because a human brought me forth from my youth. And I will say to him, what are these wounds between your hands? And he will say, those are which I was wounded in the house of my beloved. What's interesting is the Masoretic text says the house of my friends.
Yeah.
Beloved is a little bit stronger. That's
Uh-huh.
like basically saying, my bride. My bride is the one that put the nails in my hands, which again points stronger in the Septuagint to Yahusha being the one talking, because he's the one that got wounded by his own disciples. Okay, in a strange way, because they scattered, they fled away from him. He was betrayed by Judas, which at that point in time, Yahusha did recognize Yehuda Iscariot as one of the 12. So yeah, I don't know if that's a new head, Brother Joshua. If you want, I don't know if you want to mention something.
No, I had a question. I'm trying to find the verse that you just read. Which one was that? 13 what?
Verse 6.
Okay. So going back up to verse 5, I'm just confused as just what that's saying. It says, and one shall say, I am not a prophet, for I am a tiller of the ground, for a man brought me up thus from my youth. But then after asked, it definitely seems like it's Yahusha that it's referring to, and from 5 to 6, because it talks about the wounds in his hands. But what does he mean that I am not a prophet, for I am a tiller of the ground? For a man brought me up from youth. Verse
5, I don't think is referring to Yahusha. That's referring to someone else. That's talking about a random human saying that. Because if you read in the prior verses before 5, it says, it will be in that day the prophets will be ashamed. It's talking about prophets in Jerusalem. Each of his vision while he
read it in the context of 5 and 6, it says, one shall say, I am not a prophet, for I am a tiller of the ground, for a man brought me up from my youth. And I will say to him, what are these wounds between your hands? So it seems like this guy that's saying, and I will say to him, what are these wounds between your hands, is saying to this person in verse 5.
But you got to take the context from the prior verses before 5. You can't take 6, because 6 is switching gears. 6 is talking about a messianic prophecy. It's not talking about the same thing. You see what I'm saying? You got to take the prior verses to get the context of verse 5. It's talking about prophets right before that verse. It's saying it will be in that day the prophets will be ashamed of each of his vision while he prophesied. And they will put on a cloak made of hair because they lied. And he will say, the he is they. It's literally talking about one of the prophets saying, I'm not a prophet because I'm a person working the land, because a human brought me forth from my youth. Verse 6.
You're just saying, I got
you. Yeah. So I'm just trying to explain here. You got to be careful, because a lot of the prophets, they'll switch gears like literally the next verse. So it's very confusing sometimes. So that's why I'm saying that the prior verse kind of gives the context in verse 4 and even the verses before verse 4. So that's why I believe it's two different contexts. Once you get to verse 6, it's definitely talking about Yahusha, because Yahusha obviously would not be saying I'm not a prophet. And Yahusha pre-existed, so it wouldn't make sense for him to say I was someone that was brought forth from a human. I mean, that's another reason I believe it has to be two different topics.
Yeah.
So, but no, that's a good question though you brought up. That's a very good question. So obviously verse 6 and 7 is talking about verse 6 is obviously talking about Yahusha. He's wounded in the house of his friends. It's probably referring to the night he got taken by the Romans and all that. And then he got impaled that night. See here, sword has been raised up against my shepherds. So then it goes back to the shepherds here in verse 7. Against my male citizens, says Yahuwah Almighty, strike the shepherds and remove the sheep. I will lay my hand upon the small, and it will be in all the earth, says Yahuwah. 2 of its parts will be utterly destroyed and come to an end, but the 3rd part will be spared in it. And I will carry over the 3rd part through fire. So now it's switching gears from talking about what he's destroying. Now he's talking about what he's about to spare. So verse 9 is now talking about the remnant here. I will carry over the 3rd part through fire. I will make them red hot like silver is tried by fire. I will test them like gold has been tested. By the way, this is not a new concept. If you read the book of Daniel, which seems like Daniel is like 200 years after Zechariah. So it's like he's like pretty much depending on a lot of the earlier prophets, the way Daniel writes his book, because a lot of the terminology he uses the same terminology as Zechariah. We talked about, the chapters. What chapter was that before, Mom? Was that 9 or 10 where it talks about Jerusalem's going to be trodden by the nations? That's like very similar to Daniel's trodden by the Gentiles. So Daniel's relying on a lot of literature, a lot of words and terminology from Zechariah, it seems. So you can find in, I think, Daniel 12, where it says many shall be tested.
Yeah.
That seems to be the same context as this, that the remnant is going to be tested and tried through fire, refined through fire. He will call on my name. So now it's switching gears a lot. This chapter can be really confusing unless you know like the context, because it goes from now it's talking about the people, now it's talking about Yahuwah with the he. It's actually referring to his people as singular. That's interesting. He will call on my name and I will hear him. So now Israel becomes singular there, which is
Yours
weird.
says he?
Yeah, that could just be a translator issue, possibly. The Lexham here has the he as Israel, meaning he will call on my name.
Yeah.
So for some reason the translator made it a he.
Yeah. Well, it's probably
And Breton actually, interestingly enough, has they, so it could be a translator.
Say, but it's like splitting hairs,
And I will say, this is my people. So the my people definitely gives you the context of who the he is. And he will say, Yahuwah is my Elohim. So sometimes, depending on the Greek word or Hebrew word, sometimes it's singular, plural. It depends on what's in the Greek there, which translator would be correct there. I would have to look at my my Strong's here to see if it should be singular or plural. Let's see, what's the word for he here? Oh, ego. See, that's the weird thing. The Greek word ego or ego is sometimes plural or singular. Thayer's definition, I, me, my. It's a very general word. It's a very what do you call, like a very, has varied definitions for the word. That's why. That it could be either or, really. Okay, let's see here. So chapter 14, here's the famous millennial context chapter that we're about to get into.
Sister Marissa has her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, sis. Thank you, Brother Joshua, for pointing that out. Go ahead, Sister Marissa.
So when they say he who calls upon my name,
the
thing about that is that everybody thinks that whoever calls upon his name shall be saved, right? That's what the church teaches, right?
Yeah. I would say, but I don't even think they promote that, though. Somehow they spiritualize that Joel verse 232. I don't even think they would teach that, because they don't care about calling upon his name. They would say because their translation, it says the Lord there. So they would just think, calling upon the master or the Messiah, that's how they would interpret that. But actually that verse is literally saying he who calls upon my name, which the Greek and Hebrew for name, there's 2 parts to that word. It means his character, who he is, his personality, plus the pronunciation of his name. So it's like it's all included in that word. So it's not just talking about the pronunciation. And I know a lot of sacred namers on the other side, they want to misinterpret that verse and say, oh, you know, if you don't call on the right name, you're not going to be saved, and, you know, all that jazz. That's not what the context of that word means. That's not what the definition of the word means. The word in itself is his proper name and who he is. So you can know his name phonetically, pronunciation wise, but don't know who he is, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Go ahead, Joshua. I see you got your hand up. Or, oh no, Marissa, that's you. My bad. My eyes are messed up.
What I was saying is that this is what the church teaches, because this is what I've heard from the pulpit. They basically says, whoever calls on the name of Yeshua shall be saved. And they use that scripture to imply that anyone that calls on his name, right? They call on Jesus, right? And if you call on the name of Jesus, even if you're doing the wrong thing, you'll be saved just because you call on his name. And that is kind of unscriptural.
Yeah, that is unscriptural. Actually, that chapter, they're missing the other verse that's like right after it that says they're a remnant. The remnant that Yahuwah calls or predestines. They like to conveniently ignore any verse that's predestination. They don't like that. A lot of denominations don't like that, because that same chapter you're referring to, literally the next verse is like, or even the second part of the verse, literally says, you know, those that he has called or chosen, which obviously shows a predestination concept. He doesn't choose everyone for salvation. So that's something that they don't want to admit. It's not just about calling upon his name. It's those that are calling upon his name are those that he has predestined or chosen. And that's Joel 2:32. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of Yahuwah shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and Jerusalem shall the saved one be, as Yahuwah has said. And they that have glad tidings preach to them, whom Yahuwah has called. So obviously that's not everyone. Obviously, if you understand the concept of election, the doctrine of election and predestination, that's not how it works. You know, so obviously just calling upon someone's name, if you've been predestined to be grafted into his people, then yeah, and to accept his sacrifice, his atoning sacrifice, yes, it's referring to you. But if it's someone he has not predestined, that would not occur to a random Joe Schmo on the street that doesn't even know him, that's just saying his name. You know, you see what I'm saying? So like, it's important to understand context. And that last part of the verse, I doubt they focus on that last part of the verse, because like I said, the majority of Christianity is very anti-predestination. So that just shows election right there, who he has called. Anyway, but that was a good point Sister Marissa brought up. Very good point. Yeah. So now we're going to start Zechariah 14. And my little header here says, Yahuwah, king over all the earth. Behold, the days of Yahuwah are coming, and your spoils will be divided among you. And I will gather all nations against Jerusalem for war, and the city will be conquered, and the houses will be snatched away, and women will be defiled, and half of the city will go out into captivity. But the rest of my people will not be utterly destroyed. The remnant of my people will not be utterly destroyed from the city. And Yahuwah will go out and set up an army against those from the city, and Yahuwah an army against those nations, just like the day of his arrangement in a day of war. And in that day his feet will be placed upon the mountain of Olives, the one opposite Jerusalem from east, and the Mount of Olives will be separated half to the east sea and a very great abyss. Oh, that's interesting. They chose to use the word abyss there. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the abyss is the waters below, so that kind of makes sense. There you have the waters of the abyss and all that, so that kind of makes sense. And half of the mountain of this will slope to the north, and half of it to the south, and a raven of my mountains will be shut up, and the raven of the mountains will be joined to Azal, and it will be blocked up just as it was blocked in the days of the earthquake, in the days of Uzziah, king of Yehuda. and Yahuwah my Elohim will be present with all his set apart ones with him. Where have we heard that before? He will come with the myriads of his set apart ones with him. Book of Jude. Okay. And it will be in that day, there will be no light and life and frost. It will be for one day. A lot of Kingdom Now people don't like that verse right there. One day, 24 hours. Okay. The day of Yahuwah is only a 24-hour period. Okay. And that day is known to Yahuwah, and not a day and not a night. And toward evening, meaning sunset, there will be light. And in that day, living water will go out from Jerusalem, half of it into the first sea, half of the water going out from half of it into the last sea. And in summer and in spring, it will be thus. And Yahuwah will be king upon all the earth. In that day, there will be one Yahuwah and his name one. One will surround all the earth and the wilderness from Geba to Rimmon down south to Jerusalem, but Ramah will remain upon the place from the gate of Benjamin to the place of the first gate, to the gate of the corners, to the tower of Hananel, to the vessels of the king. They will dwell in it and will no longer be accursed, and Jerusalem will reside confidently. And this will be the falling by which Yahuwah will slaughter all the people, as many as made war against Jerusalem. Their flesh will melt while they have stood upon their feet. Their eyes will run out of their sockets, and their tongues will melt in their mouth. And it will be in that day a great terror of Yahuwah will come upon them. Each one will seize the hand of his neighbor, and his hand will be joined to the hand of in the hand of his neighbor, and Yehuda will set up an army in Jerusalem, and it will gather together the strength of all the people from all around, gold and silver and clothing for a great multitude. And this will be the falling of the horses and the mules and the camels and the donkeys and all the livestock, the ones that are in those camps according to this falling. And it will be as many as were left behind from all the nations, the ones who came upon Jerusalem. They will go up yearly to worship the King, Yahuwah Almighty, and to celebrate the Feast of Tents or Tabernacles. And it will be as many as do not go up from every tribe of the land to Jerusalem to worship the King, Yahuwah Almighty. Even these will be added to those. But if the tribe of Egypt does not go up nor come, then on them shall be the destruction by which Yahuwah will strike every nation, as many as do not go up to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. This will be the sin of Egypt and the sin of all the nations, as many as do not go up to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. In that day there will be upon the bridle of the horse set apartness to Yahuwah Almighty. And the kettles will be in the house of Yahuwah like shallow bowls in front of the face of the altar. So there's going to be a physical temple in the millennium, a physical altar. You're going to have meat pots there. Okay? And all those sacrificing will come, and they will receive from them, and they will boil in them, and there will no longer be Canaanites in the house of Yahuwah Almighty. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
No more. Bye-bye. In that day.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Beautiful.
No more Canaanite giants. Bye-bye.
It's interesting. Do they want it to be more than one 24-hour day?
The whole
Want the great and terrible day of Yahuwah to be more than that?
some people just want to spiritualize every little thing and it's make everything esoteric and all that.
You know what I like when it's talking about the waters running from this point to that point? I love my footnotes say that it'll be running from the Dead Sea to the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, that's what you call historical vernacularisms, where the NIV understands they're writing a translation in the 70s. No one's going to understand certain seas that the Septuagint is describing. So they're trying to modernize it for the audience, the people they're translating for. So that's a historical vernacularism that you'll see a lot in translations, where they're trying to help people understand certain geographical locations of what they would be called today, or whenever the translator's translating. So yeah, that's very common.
Brother,
Um,
Mom says there, okay, and there shall be no longer, no, there shall no longer be a traitor in the house of Yahuwah of hosts on that day.
traitor.
Traitor.
Interesting paraphrase there.
Yeah, that is.
What's interesting, there seems to be a lot of, I can't really back this up by fact or anything, but there seems to be a theory going on about Judas's ethnicity. And there's like a huge conspiracy theory out there that he might have been of some type of Esau lineage that might have been Hittite. I don't know how true that is, but you know, I would have to, supposedly according to the name of his last name, you know, Iscariot. There's like a conspiracy theory about where the Iscariots come from, and you know, and all that. But anyway, but the Greek does say Canaanite, so I'm wondering where the translation translation Sister Sadia read from. I wonder where they're getting the idea that it means traitor. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I'll definitely have to look into the Greek and Hebrew of that word, where they're getting that. See here. Oh, the Greek has an asterisk next to it. I guess they don't have a Strong's number for it. Let me see here. H3669 Canaanite. Yeah. It's like an actual Canaanite in the Masoretic. It's even showing. Yeah. Huh. Interesting. A Canaanite or inhabitant of Canaan. Standing for their neighbors, the Ishmaelites who conducted merchandise caravans, yada yada yada, trafficker. Huh. Yeah, it's funny that the word for Canaanite, like the Canaanite giants, also means trafficker. And I find it funny because you have all this human trafficking going on today.
Yep.
And all that. I just kind of wonder.
It's become very common.
But anyway, so that's the end of our Zechariah portion. So let's see here. I think my mom's going to be taking over here. I'm reading Ecclesiastes chapters 6 to 9, but I'm probably going to do a separate recording just because that recording itself probably took a good hour or so on that recording. So let me just
Hey Doug, I had a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, sis.
Okay, so you know how you read it said those left behind. Very interesting, because the church believes that those left behinds are the ones that are going to be destroyed.
Yeah. There's many scriptures that show that's not the case. Like Proverbs 2:21 says the righteous are left behind, the wicked are uprooted from the earth. Many scriptures that show the tares are taken first, actually. The tares are put into the fire, the lake of fire, before he catches us away into the air. So it's actually those that are left behind are actually the wheat, not the tares. So that's a misunderstanding that the church has due to tradition and a whole that, man. That's a
the whole rapture. They're thinking of the people that are gone are swept away, and the ones that are standing are the ones that are left. Yeah, that whole false theology has a lot to do with this man called John Nelson Darby. He made the Darby Bible. He was a member of the Plymouth Brethren type of cult in Christianity, and they were a very weird sect of Christianity. They were called the Plymouth Brethren. And there's, he believed in this weird idea of dispensationalism, the church taking over, replacing Israel. The only reason he believes in a pre-trib rapture is because that's the only way. He needs that to have his dispensational theology work.
without a pre-trib rapture, you can't have church replacing Israel, because there's only if he's only returning one time and he's only catching us away in the rapture one time, then you know, how are you going to explain what happens to the Jews and then what happens to the Christians? For him, he uses the pre-trib rapture as a crutch for his false dispensational replacement theology. And that's the only reason Christians today believe in a pre-trib rapture, is mainly him. Way before him, in the early first centuries, most early first century believers knew that it was after the tribulation that Yahushua was returning, and that the rapture had to happen immediately after the tribulation of those days, as Matthew 24:29 literally says. So the only reason people believe in the pre-trib today is because of the guy John Nelson Darby and his you could say anti-Shemite theology. Very, very, very anti-Judean theology, and trying to replace Israel and all that. But anyway, all right. So let me see here. Let me start a new recording here.